The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, a sea of tuxedos and diamond smiles masking quiet arrogance. Cameras flashed as the billionaire, renowned for his empire built on old money and prejudice, raised his glass to toast real success. Across the room she stood, the youngest black CEO in the hall, poised, powerful yet invisible to those who only saw color. When his mocking laughter carried through the crowd, dismissing her as a guest of honors +1, whispers spread like wildfire. He didn't know her name. He didn't know that every deal, every contract, every subsidiary under his brand now answered to her. The crowd watched, entertained by cruelty, unaware that by midnight, the balance of power in that golden hall would shatter forever. Would you still laugh if you knew who owned the room you're standing in? The gala marked the 100th anniversary of the Harrington Group, a dynasty built on oil, steel, and the sweat of those who never sat at its table. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel glowed in gold, flooded with reporters, investors, and socialites eager to capture a night of legacy and excellence. The air smelled of power and perfume, both intoxicating, both fleeting. Amara Langston arrived quietly, her black silk gown flowing like authority itself. Every movement was deliberate, the kind born from years of proving herself twice over. The whispers started the moment she entered. Who's she with? Is she in PR? None recognized the woman whose name had quietly appeared on merger documents just days earlier, the same documents that made her the new majority shareholder of the Harrington Group. At the center of the room, Charles Harrington basked in attention. Silver-haired, smug, and untouchable, he stood as a monument to a past that refused to die. To him, diversity was a trend, not a truth. His speech praised the preservation of real business values, a phrase that drew polite laughter from those too polite or too afraid to challenge it. Amara listened from the edge of the crowd, her calm composure concealing years of endurance. She remembered the boardrooms where her ideas were stolen, the handshakes that froze when they met her skin, the investors who questioned her leadership because her success didn't look traditional. Every scar had built her armor, and tonight, she didn't need to fight for recognition. The papers already bore her signature. When their eyes finally met, he didn't recognize her. To him, she was just another guest with brown skin in a black dress, the kind of woman meant to stand in the background of photographs, not in the headlines. He lifted his glass in a smirk of mockery, a gesture that said, "You don't belong here." But Amara only smiled. She knew what he didn't. In a few hours, when the gala lights dimmed and the announcement went public, the man who built empires on exclusion would learn that power no longer looked like him. The stage was set. The reckoning had begun. As the orchestra swelled and champagne flowed, the evening unfolded with the same predictable grace. Laughter, speeches, and shallow praise. But beneath the glittering surface, quiet currents shifted. Amara moved through the room with effortless composure, greeting investors who now unknowingly worked for her. Each handshake was a silent revelation waiting to be uncovered. Charles Harrington, still basking in admiration, spotted her near the edge of the dance floor. He leaned toward his companions, old men in older suits, and whispered something. That made them laugh, their eyes flicking toward her like she was entertainment. She felt the burn of their stares, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she offered them the same smile she had mastered during years of being underestimated, polite, poised, and utterly unreadable. When Charles approached her, the crowd parted. "You look lost," he said, his tone dripping with the condescension of someone who had never been told no. Cameras turned toward them, sensing tension. She let him talk, each word more revealing than he realized. He rambled about the importance of mentorship and how people from challenging backgrounds should aim high but stay humble. Every syllable was laced with unspoken bias, the kind disguised as advice from those who mistake privilege for wisdom. Amara's silence unnerved him. He expected gratitude, discomfort, anything, but not calm indifference. When she finally spoke, it wasn't to defend herself. "You're right," she said softly, her voice steady. "Humility is important, especially when history turns its gaze your way." He chuckled, dismissing her words as the polite chatter of someone impressed by his presence. But she had already checked her phone. The press release had gone live. The Harrington Group's acquisition had just been made public across every financial network. Within minutes, whispers started to ripple through the crowd. Phones buzzed, eyes turned. One of the investors hurried over, his face pale. "Charles, is it true? Langston Innovations?" The billionaire's expression stiffened. "What about them?" he asked. "They're our partners, not owners." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Another investor stepped forward, showing him, the headline flashing on his screen, "Langston Innovations finalizes 78% acquisition of Harrington Group." The room froze. Amara didn't move. She stood quietly amid the chaos, the embodiment of composure. Reporters rushed forward, cameras clicking like thunder. Charles stared at her, realization dawning. The woman he had publicly humiliated moments ago now owned his legacy. The silence that followed was electric. Guests who had laughed with him now avoided his gaze, their loyalty dissolving in real time. He turned back to her, his confidence unraveling. How?" he stammered. But Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Every headline, every whisper, every flashing camera did it for her. She remembered the first time she'd walked into a boardroom 10 years ago, dismissed, ignored, told she didn't have the right presence. She remembered the deals that fell through because she was too ambitious, the emails that never came, the glass ceilings that cracked but never shattered. And she remembered vowing that one day she wouldn't ask for a seat at the table. She'd own the table itself. Now she did. Charles's empire, once a monument to exclusion, was hers. But the victory wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about visibility. Every young black woman watching that night would see what he refused to, that brilliance, resilience, and dignity were not to be underestimated. As the music faded and murmurs filled the air, Amara took the stage, not to gloat, but to lead. She thanked everyone for attending and, with unwavering calm, introduced herself as the new CEO of the Harrington Group's parent company. Her words were measured, her tone gracious, her power absolute. Charles stood among the crowd, his face a portrait of disbelief. For decades, he had been the one holding the microphone, defining success on his terms. Tonight, he couldn't even find the words to reclaim his pride. The spotlight that once adored him now illuminated her, and the world watched as the old guard bowed, not by choice, but by consequence. The night that began as his celebration ended as her coronation. And, in that transformation, the truth of power, legacy, and justice finally found its voice. The announcement hit like a lightning strike. Cameras turned, flashes blinding, and the once celebratory hum of the ballroom transformed into a low, uneasy murmur. The gilded chandeliers still shimmered, but the illusion of control, his control, had shattered. Charles Harrington stood motionless, surrounded by the very people who had fed his ego for decades, now inching away as if his downfall were contagious. Amara's calm figure at the podium commanded silence. Every eye was on her, every breath suspended. She didn't need to raise her voice. Authority radiated from the quiet certainty in her tone. "The future of the Harrington Group," she said, "will be defined not by heritage but by merit, not by exclusion but by evolution. Her words were not sharp, but they cut through the air with surgical precision. Charles's jaw tightened. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one defining the narrative. His empire, the foundation of his identity, had slipped from his grasp. In the crowd, he could see journalists scribbling, investors whispering, photographers zooming in on Amara's poised face. Every flash was another nail in the coffin of his legacy. He tried to speak, to salvage his dignity. This is a misunderstanding," he muttered into the microphone. But the feedback screeched, drowning his words. His voice, once commanding, now sounded small, desperate even. The audience didn't respond. Some looked away. Others filmed. The mighty patriarch of industry had become a relic in real time. Amara didn't interrupt. She simply watched him crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. For years he had spoken over others. Tonight, silence answered him back. When she finally stepped toward him, her expression wasn't gloating, it was resolute. "Mr. Harrington," she said evenly, "I appreciate the foundation you built. But even the tallest towers must make room for the sun." There was no malice in her words, only truth. He had mocked her earlier for standing in his presence. Now, the entire room stood for her. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then rising into a wave that drowned the last remnants of his pride. In that moment, she wasn't just a CEO. She was the embodiment of every barrier broken, every bias defied, every silent humiliation turned into strength. Charles lowered his head, realizing the bitter irony. The woman he had dismissed as unworthy now held everything he once ruled. The empire he built on exclusion had been reclaimed by the very brilliance he refused to see. The gala lights dimmed slightly, the orchestra beginning a slow, solemn melody. Amara turned from him, her heels echoing softly across the marble floor, as she descended the stage. Behind her, the old world cracked, not with an explosion, but with the quiet collapse of relevance. History had just rewritten itself, and this time, it was written in her name. By the time the night ended, the Harrington Gala no longer felt like a celebration. The laughter had faded, the champagne had gone flat, and the air, once perfumed with entitlement, now carried the weight of revelation. Guests left in silence, avoiding eye contact with the man whose arrogance had just been immortalized in headlines across the nation. Charles sat alone at the edge of the ballroom, the empire he once ruled now a hollow nameplate on the table before him. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be powerless. Not because someone took it from him, but because he never believed anyone else could have it. Amara stood by the grand window overlooking the city. The skyline that once symbolized his dominance now reflected her victory. Yet, she felt no triumph, only clarity. She had won something far greater than revenge, representation. Every decision she'd ever made, every sleepless night spent fighting for recognition, had led to this moment. Not to destroy a man, but to redefine the meaning of success. As dawn approached, news anchors dissected the story, calling it a landmark moment for corporate history and a powerful statement on diversity and leadership. Young professionals across the country reposted her quote, "Power is not inherited. It's earned by those who refuse to be invisible." In homes where little girls once wondered if they'd ever be seen, Amara's image now filled the screens, confident, composed, and unapologetically black. She had turned humiliation into history. Back inside the emptying hall, Charles finally rose. For a fleeting moment, his gaze met hers. There was no anger now, just the heavy recognition of a world he no longer understood. Without a word, he left, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor, fading into insignificance. Amara watched him go, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of closure. Change didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived dressed in grace. She turned back to the city, the first light of morning spilling through the glass, soft, golden, and symbolic. The same light that once illuminated the faces of men who ruled, unchecked now, bathed her in brilliance. The old empire had fallen, and from its ashes, something stronger, something fairer, had risen. The gala had begun as a monument to legacy. It ended as a lesson in evolution, because sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or protests. It comes in boardrooms, dressed in silence and strategy. And in that silence, one truth remained unshakable. Prejudice built the past, but progress will always own the future. Final line, retain for YouTube narration impact. He humiliated her in front of everyone, but she didn't need to fight back. She simply let the truth speak for her.